Hi Year 12, today's video is for our advanced students who are studying 1984 for their Text and Human Experiences Common Module. I would like to welcome Miss Gurr as our special guest for today's video to talk to us about how the individual and collective human experiences and other parts of the rubric link to 1984. So welcome, or vice versa, 1984 links to the rubric. Welcome Miss Gurr.
Pleased to be here.
So firstly, what I think we should look at is this part of the rubric here, where it's about the individual and collective human experiences. Do you see them as being something separate, or that we have to look at them together, and how do you think they're represented in 1984?
Okay, I think you have to look at them separately initially, and looking towards, for example, Winston's individual experiences are part of a collective, and Julia's individual experiences may be part of a collective. And we talked about this in class, that Julia, she doesn't seem to be too connected with other people. I thought that if we look at Winston, his experience within Oceania, it's quite metonymous. If we look at the metonymy, where he is the one that represents the many in terms of how he sees the world. Julia, we don't have her so much as being representative of a group. We feel that she's actually quite different from the others. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would, and it actually comes back to something that you mentioned just before we started recording, which had me thinking about family when you were saying that Julia doesn't seem to have parents or siblings, and we have, because family is obviously a human experience, and it can be both individual and collective. We all have an understanding of what family is, and yet there's different types of family. But we have this idea that we've got the Parsons family. We have Winston, who has those memories of his mother, and there seems to be that deeper connection to his mother and his sister than what he has to, say, Catherine, who is his wife. Yeah. Then we have the notion of Big Brother itself. And, interestingly, as an aside, I did some research on the Big Brother movement, and it started in 1925. So Orwell would definitely have known about that.
Yeah.
But I think Julia, and I want to know your thoughts on it, is like, why does she not seem to have a family? Like, what is it about Julia that there is no connection?
I think that when you look at how she has grown, and then she talks about the women in the dorm, and she's really put off by them. She has no connection to them. She's even the smell of them, she talks about it that way. And I find that interesting, that she doesn't have that same connection with the people that Winston seems to crave. She is not craving those connections in the same way that Winston does, I don't think.
And yet we know that she says that she has slept with scores of men. So you could argue she's trying to get a physical connection to others.
Yeah, but then that physical connection is not the same as the one that she's grown up with. The connection that she looks for, she doesn't need that family, because that's how she's been brought up. All the way through, she doesn't have those memories because she's been out and about doing other things for the other, in inverted commas, family, for Big Brother and his family.
So is she? So that could possibly take us towards love and the idea of love, and she does love Winston, but this is really her first experience of love then, and her first understanding of love. Would you say?
Well, yes. I think it surprises her in the experience that she has with him, because most of the time she's been quite strategic about keeping away from any sorts of things that would get her into trouble. And she knows now that she's probably doing something that will get her in trouble, but she keeps doing it.
But I think that then takes us to another idea of we have that moment where Winston acknowledges that the moment they decided to rebel, or the moment he decided to rebel, he was dead. And he has that quote, I can't remember it off the top of my head, about the fact that they're a living corpse and that we are the dead. But she comes back and says, but we're not dead. And so it's like she's got a sense of hope that he doesn't have.
She has hope, but then we have to tie this to memory, because her memory, she doesn't have those memories like Winston has that he can understand about the family. So she's a representation of what what the Parsons children will become.
One of those moments. So is she representing then the individual experience, or is she a representation of the collective? So are we seeing her as an individual experience in this, but in her representation, because Julia is the every woman from, she's named after the name used in Rome to denote the every woman. So can we take from the use of her name that even though this is her individual experience, because if we can link it to what the Parsons children will become, this is what the people of Oceania are. This is the collective experience.
Or, and this is a frightening prospect, but is Julia in between worlds?
How?
Because she's between Winston's world and the Parsons children's world. She's the generation in between. And so the Parsons children could rebel, but it's unlikely. Julia is rebelling. She doesn't see it necessarily as the same type of rebellion that Winston sees it as. So there's gradually less and less and less chance of rebellion. We've moved from love to rebellion, which is a bit weird.
It's very discursive. So if that's the case, I'm actually going to jump forward in the rubric then down to here. So because this is one of the things that people are grappling with a bit, the anomalies, the paradoxes, and the inconsistencies. But also, I think it's really important to note that the anomalies, paradoxes, and inconsistencies in human behaviour and motivations. So is there a paradox or anomaly or an inconsistency in her human behaviour, and even in her motivations?
It would seem that her relationship with Winston is inconsistent with her past relationships.
Yeah, and it's inconsistent, or it's anomalous. The relationship itself is anomalous
with the rest of
Oceania.
Yeah.
So what about for Winston then? I mean, we've talked in class about the ultimate paradox of Winston being the controlled anarchist, and that being the true tragedy of the book, of the novel. But
which is in itself a paradox, being a controlled anarchist.
Yeah, because how can you be a controlled anarchist? And then there's the paradox of the love, when he finally realizes that he loves Big Brother, but Big Brother is about the death of love. But is there other paradoxes or anomalies there, or inconsistencies in his behaviour and motivations?
Oh, well, we've talked about him being anomalous with the rest of Oceania, in that he goes to Charrington's shop, he picks up a book, he has the desire to write. Even at the very first opening of the book, you can see that he is different from others. And that's when I've spoken about it in class, my way of distinguishing the inconsistencies, it's one person being inconsistent in their own behaviour, and if it's anomalous behaviour, it's that they are anomalous from all the other people. I'm sort of waving my hands around as I speak to do them as groups or to do them as individuals. And then the paradoxes themselves, they can be either of the individual. Oh, well, I would think the paradox is a result of forces acting on them.
And something interesting that you said there is that even from the beginning of the book, he is distinct from everybody else. He's different to everybody else. And yet, in the description of him as he's entering the Victory Mansions and walking up those stairs, he's no different to even the building he's in. His body is as decayed as the world around him,
Yep.
and so he's not distinct.
No. In that case, that's a part of where we're looking at how those human we go back to the first part of the rubric where you're looking at his individual experience, and his emotion is actually being represented through the setting, and his did I say his emotion? His emotion is represented through the setting, and his human quality, his frailty, his vulnerability, all of those things are represented through how he's described and how his world is described.
I do have a question for you. We haven't really talked about it that much in class, and I think it's something important to discuss. It's the role of religion in the text, in that we have all those churches crumbling. We have O'Brien trying to, he's discussing that they're getting rid of religion by making themselves the religion. The 2 minutes hate is almost like a worship of Big Brother, and religion is a collective experience and an individual experience.
Marx had said that religion is the opium of the people, the masses. Religion is the opium of the masses. And I think that Orwell is taking his lead and taking that and putting it into his text as well. The other thing with religion, and it's interesting how it's brought in, is through the Oranges and Lemons song, because all of those churches have slowly but surely disappeared over time and taken up purely functional, sort of storehouses and things like that, that they've become part of the government. And they, traditionally governments and religion should not mix, and yet here we have a mixing of what seems to be the religious fervour that you get from the 2 minutes hate and all of that thing with all of that with the 2 minutes hate. I keep going back to it. Yep.
Yeah. And I think it's because it's like they're trying to create a secular society, and in creating this secular society, they're imposing a new form of religion, which is shown through the 2 minutes hate and through the posters everywhere of Big Brother.
And then there's the stories that are put there, like, we have Western religion, there's a Bible that's got the stories of what's happened with Big Brother. We have the stories of the Bible that have examples and parables. They don't have much for Big Brother. There's no stories about him. He is merely a construction.
Which is interesting because there's a story about Goldstein.
Yes, who's probably more to be looked upon, would it be right to say he's kind of like Lucifer, or that he's the opposite of Big Brother, or Big Brother's antithesis. So yeah, there's lots more stories about Goldstein. Again, is Goldstein real? Was Goldstein real? Was Goldstein constructed? Was he yet another construction that's been made over time?
Well, that's one of the most ambiguous things about the book is we do have the idea that O'Brien wrote the book about Goldstein, and arguably Goldstein is O'Brien's construct. But there's those hints that perhaps O'Brien once was a Winston, and the Brotherhood did exist, and O'Brien created the Brotherhood, and then he was also a controlled anarchist, and maybe O'Brien is Winston's future.
And the Brotherhood are against Big Brother. Ties back again to your family.
Wow, so we've just gone full circle. Back to the beginning.
Yeah.
It's rather deep. And on that, we only have about 40 seconds left of this video, so I think we need to stop it there. But actually, really quickly, something else we haven't talked about is the most obvious paradoxes in the books of war is peace, freedom is slavery, ignorance is strength, the ministries themselves, and
mini love,
mini
plenty.
And we haven't even spoken about language yet.
We could do that another day.
Okay. Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope this helps you, and good luck.
Good luck with your discursives.
And thank you for coming along, Miss Gurr. Very much appreciated.